Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 55 in the book of Hebrews. Specifically, we're going to close out the chapter 11 of Hebrews, the Hall of Fame of Faith, and we're going to find a group of people who had to wait until literally the next life before they got the promises and the good stuff about being a Christian. So the title today is Sometimes You Have to Wait. We started a little bit yesterday with Jerome of Prague, who's a guy who refused release from prison, which is another characteristic of these people that had to wait. Remember, faith is trusting in the promiser before the promises come true. And today, we're going to have a whole list of people whose promises didn't come true in this life, and their life was pretty brutal, actually. So today we have a bunch of people who did not receive what was promised, yet. Recently, a friend said that, hey, Christianity is one of blessing. Well, tell that to these people. This is a part of the Bible that the prosperity gospel will never, people that preach the prosperity gospel, they will never preach on this passage. So people that got the good stuff only after they left this planet. Here it is. This is from Hebrews chapter 11, starting in verse 36. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy. Wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And all these, though commended through their belief, did not receive what was promised. Since God has provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. All right. So let's just review what these people had to endure. They suffered mocking. That is, they were ridiculed verbally for being of Jesus. They were flogged, which is a particularly brutal form of whipping. So they were tortured of body as well. They suffered chains and imprisonment. They were deprived of their liberty of place and liberty of movement because of Jesus. They were stoned. And remember, there's only one reason to stone people, and that's to kill them to death. And it's a community kind of a death. So it's done for the Lord's sake. They were sawn in two. And remember, they did this for the cause of Jesus without anesthesia, I might add. They were killed with a sword. And again, these are not theoretical swords, real swords for the faith that they had in Jesus. They went about in skins. That is, they didn't have money for clothing. Remember, clothing was very expensive because every thread had to be manually laid. So clothing, though it's cheap today, was very expensive before machines. So they had to wear skins. They were destitute. They had financial lack. And they were afflicted and mistreated. That is, the people around them didn't act neutral to them. They didn't tolerate. They were intolerant towards them. And they were wandering about in deserts, mountain dens, and caves. That is, they were homeless. All right, so that's from the world's eyes. But the value in the God's eyes, and if you look with kingdom criteria, these are people that had faith before the promises. So these are people that didn't get the riches and the home and the comfort and the tearlessness that God is afforded. So in God's economy, he says the world was not worthy of these people, at least this world. Because remember, the next world is the antidote to their suffering. The next world is the antidote to their suffering. So think about this. So rather than mocking, they're praised for their beliefs. Rather than flogging and physical discomfort, they're going to be comforted in the next world. They're going to be not imprisoned. They're going to be free. They're not going to be killed. They're going to have eternal life. They're not going to be sawn in two. They're going to be made whole. They're not going to be impoverished and destitute because they're going to be adopted by the richest king that in the universe. They're not going to be afflicted and mistreated and verbally abused because they're going to be praised for what they did. They're even praised here for what they did. And they're not going to be wandering about homeless. No, they're actually going to be home. So the next world is this antidote. So they did not receive here what they're going to get there. And every one of these people is kind of anonymously referred to here. We don't have any of these people's names. They're referred to as they're going to be honored for being right and they're going to be comforted and they're going to get freedom, and they're going to have eternal life. They're going to be made whole. They're going to have riches of blessing, and they're going to be praised with the term well done. All right, so what can we learn from these people, and what can we take? Well, I think this, that you're going to suffer, and I'm going to suffer today. So we're going to have at least temptation, which is to be resisted, is called suffering in the Bible. And like these great heroes, we're going to have a couple of things that we're going to need to do. We're going to have to key in on the presence of God. Then we're going to key in on the gifts of God for the moment. In other words, God gives grace sufficient. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. So in all these things, it's probably going to be done secretly. So God doesn't settle accounts here and now. He settles accounts after death, much later, when injustice and physical suffering and discrimination and homelessness and misunderstanding is going to be fixed. He is going to be with you today in your suffering, in your temptation, in maybe some of this formal abuse that these people had to endure, but he's going to give you his presence, and he's going to give you grace for the moment. So he is with you, and he's giving you all that you need for the moment, just like he did to this anonymous and praised group of people. So sometimes for justice, you have to wait for the final closing of the books. And in the meantime, we have a job to do. In the meantime, our job is to entrust and be faithful. Hebrews 11 has talked about it from the beginning to the end. So we want to be faithful and entrust ourselves to God, to his promises, to his character, to the things that he's accomplished before and until we see all those promises accomplished. Thanks for listening.